Good afternoon and welcome to Tortoise Tech. If you're new here, my name is Reese 4Piece from KFC or Wookie Triple XL, and in today's review, I'm having a look at this Dell monitor. The model number is the S2721HGF. Nothing that easily rolls off of the tongue, but something that actually rolls quite easily off of the budget. I've spoken about this monitor so many times in the top 10 weekly specials episodes that I just decided to then buy one. Because I wanted to see if it was as good as I thought it might be. And bullet point of the presentation is pretty much yes, and then it's got some weird cool things that it does and some new technology that actually is faking a 1 millisecond response time because it's theoretically impossible. But let's start from the beginning with this monitor as if it was a normal review, if it wasn't something that I had already purchased, and try to remove as much bias as humanly possible. So physical setup, starting from the bottom. The stand, the little base stand, tiny, perfect. Doesn't take that much space on the desk. Also, you can't rotate the monitor on the base because tiny base. So you gotta like physically move it if you want to turn it or something like that. And if you want to get into the esports intimacy position, then normally a big stand, like a big V-type kind of stand, would take out a lot of desk space and make it quite uncomfortable. So because this is small, it makes it actually quite easy. Periscope neck, maybe a little bit shorter than it could be. It does go all the way to the bottom. It's not that it doesn't have a lot of travel, as I demonstrate now. So it does go, quite low and then come quite far up, as it were. So it's better for short people than it is for tall people. I did find it a little bit short. I'm wishing it was just like literally 20 mils higher. Then it would be absolutely perfect. But to get it square on with your head, it does have quite a decent amount of tilt. I'd say that's about 30 degrees, maybe a little bit more. I'll check on the official guideline for it, or on the official specs. One thing that's nice though about the neck is it does have a hole through the middle for your cable channeling. So for your power and your display, you can put it through that hole. It does neaten it up just a little bit, and it's quite nice for running other cables through. It's big enough that you can run the kettle plug through there with like absolutely no problems. Cut in the hexagon, so it kind of looks like a Cooler Master logo, which I'm not against. Obviously, it's a Dell though. Looking around the back, the vents and the finish, and I love that they haven't done mirror finish on this. I'm actually a massive fan of this more, I don't know what you would call it, like sandblasted or speckled type of finish is much nicer than the mirror finish because it's not going to scratch over time. Big old vents, around the top over here, big old vents on the back, so cooling performance. This thing literally doesn't get hot at all, sits on the desk all day, and it's not even warm to the touch. That makes me feel very confident about its longevity, which means I should be able to use this monitor for quite a long time. Moving under for the port setup though, we have the normal kettle plug. So it's got the built-in power in the monitor, which I'm way more of a fan of than adapters because it's way easier to get a kettle plug than to replace an adapter. It's got dual HDMI 2.0s and then a DisplayPort 1.4 and then a 3.5mm pass-through as well. So you can take your HDMI sound and pass through to a normal 3.5mm jack, which is nice to have. I really do like the overall look and feel of this monitor. It's a bit more understated. A lot of times with gaming monitors, they're like, look at me, I'm a gaming monitor. This is not like that. It's a bit more understated, which like I said, I'm really not against. Nice thin chin on it as well, not too thick. Bezeling from the edge is about 3 mils, so it's not going to do corner to corner very well. So if you were to span display, you're going to have quite noticeable gaps in the middle. So this definitely is a solo act, or you can obviously use it dual desktop as I do with my very old 27TN on the side. And it is noticeably better with colors. Day and night better with colors because it's a VA panel. The old TN panels just, they're washed out is the best way I could describe them. Their contrast color and saturation is just not very good. On that note, one thing that I will point out at this point in time is within the OSD itself, there actually is a saturation setting that you can do manually on the monitor, which is really cool. Not many monitors I've used in the last sort of 2 years have had that feature, to be very honest with you. And with a VA panel, saturation is your friend. So moving on to that panel, as I said, this is a VA panel. It's a 144 Hz. FreeSync Premium and G-Sync capable panel. You need a separate controller for G-Sync it's a whole nother controller in of itself, and usually it's quite a premium for that. You usually pay about 2,000 Rand or so over, or like $200 nearly. I would say closer to like 150. I forgot the Rand's not worth very much, thanks ANC, but 150 USD or so more than the standard panel for the G-Sync option. This comes with it at like what I think in America lands would be like 280 USD. I'll flash the price on the screen, but locally in South Africa it's about 4.5 grand. And if you're keeping track, most 24 144s are about 4K or so. This is a 27 and it's got G-Sync and it's curved. The curve is subtle, it's not too extreme. It's a 1000 R curve, I believe, and it's not overwhelming. It doesn't give you that visual kind of edge distortion that I sometimes see with like 1800 R curves or the higher level curves. This is actually quite subtle. It's not too much. It's a nice to have. I think flat or curved in this instance would have been quite similar. When you get it square on with the curve, it is nice to have. The back panel lighting on this is also pretty good. It does 350 CDM squared, or basically 350 nits. The brightness is enough that on max it's going to be retina burning, and it's actually good for one of its other modes. It comes with a base 4 millisecond response time, but that's theoretically the maximum possible that you can get, with a 240 being 4.16, I think, milliseconds worth of response time. So a 4 millisecond gray to gray should be good enough at 144. 144 I think was, if I'm not mistaken, closer to like 6 or 7 milliseconds. I'll flash the varying speeds on it, but it was low enough obviously that even at 4 milliseconds gray to gray that there shouldn't be any color dragging. However, on very high frame rate games like CSGO for instance, where I get like 300-400 FPS, there was actually some noticeable blur. They have included MPRT in this monitor, which is a completely another way of doing gray to gray time measurements or delay measurements, and it's based off of a strobing of the backlight to effectively create 1 millisecond. And it actually, look, it does work and it is effective in very high frame rate environments like CSGO. In something that was a lower frame rate, I found the FreeSync a lot better, to be honest, because that strobing effect then strobes your image across the screen like that. It's almost disconcerting in a certain way. Overall though, the normal FreeSync setup is by far the best. The colors and stuff remain very, very good. When you put on MPRT, it gets a bluish kind of tint to it, and it's somewhat like washed out. You have to thump the brightness and the contrast to the top levels to get something that's visually equivalent to the standard mode. The VA panel does like a really good job of color reproduction, as I said, and editing and workflow on this monitor is absolutely superb. I haven't tested the G-Sync yet, but on the 5600 XT that I've been running, everything felt pretty damn good. Some games though did feel better in MPRT with the FreeSync turned off, so I'd like to test G-Sync because that's what I'd normally be on, is my 2070 Super, which was causing my machine to crash literally every 2 hours, and now it's been tested for like 3 days at Uncle Evetech and it hasn't skipped a beat. Of course, my luck is horrendous with these sort of things, but my luck in buying this monitor just wasn't. I have below zero buyer's remorse for getting this. I think overall as a package and a proposition, it's exceptionally good. The value for money here is otherworldly, and Dell's just kind of cracked it again. They've taken, like, this feels like a baby version of their Alienware 25240. The color reproduction stuff is very similar. The general feel of it is very similar. Of course, there's a massive difference between 144 and 240, like very noticeable difference between the two. And I was missing 240 on this panel for sure. What I was not missing, however, was like an extra 4,000 Rand, literally half the price. This is definitely not half the monitor. And while it is 1080p and it's got just over 80 pixels per inch, it's not the sharpest you're ever going to find, and there is some noticeable kind of graininess to it, but it's not so bad that I felt like going back to my 24 144 at 1080p. While that is obviously sharper because it's got more pixels per inch, just having this amount of real estate for pretty much anything is fantastic. Video, and I obviously do a lot of video editing, so I wanted something with better color palette reproduction, because I noticed that things were looking very different on my phone, which is a S9, which has a 4K like AMOLED, like really high-end display, and then you go from a TN to looking on that and see the published video, and I was like, what am I actually looking at? It became very difficult to get the color balance and that sort of stuff done correctly. This made my life 10 times easier. All around, I'd have to give it a solid like 9 out of 10 until we get to value where it scores an 11 out of 10. There is no monitor in the market right now at this price and performance that has this feature set, that comes with a 3-year warranty, that's as good as this. I mean, I've tested a sickening amount of monitors in the last 6 months, basically all of the new, like a whole new series of certain brands, and just nothing has struck me on value the way that this thing does. Anyway, that is all we have time for today. If you have enjoyed this, please do hit us up with a like and subscribe, and I will see you on the flip side. Good afternoon, welcome back to Tortoise Tech. Good afternoon and welcome to Tortoise Tech.